I can't marry someone I don't understand anymore. Those were the words that shattered everything I thought I knew about love. Madison stood in the middle of our apartment, holding her wedding planner like it was a shield. 2 months before the ceremony, and suddenly the woman who once cried over dress fittings and color palettes was looking at me like I was a stranger who had wandered into her life by mistake. I am 30 years old, an automotive technician from Ohio. I fix engines, build motorcycles on weekends, and wear my work boots until they give up before I do. Madison is 28, a marketing coordinator for a real estate firm, always surrounded by people who talk about growth, goals, and brands. We met at a lake party 3 summers ago. She spilled sangria on my shirt and apologized a dozen times, but I laughed it off and told her it made me look better. She smiled, and that was it. We became inseparable, the type of couple people envied because we made ordinary days feel cinematic. For a long time, it worked. She loved my calm. I loved her energy. I was the guy who fixed her car in the rain, the one who built her a bookcase from scratch because she wanted a rustic touch. We shared playlists, late-night takeout, dreams about buying a house near the water. But somewhere between engagement photos and guest lists, something changed. It started small. She began comparing me to the husbands of her coworkers. She'd come home talking about the firm's happy hour, about how Jason just surprised his wife with a Tesla, or how Nate takes his girlfriend to Europe every other month. Then she'd look at me, grease still on my hands from work, and ask half-jokingly if I ever thought about trading my old truck for something more modern. I told myself it was harmless, that she was just venting, but the tone kept shifting. Her laughter became sharper. Her eyes lingered on my flaws longer. She began saying things like, "You don't really get how my world works," or "Sometimes I feel like you're too simple." The words stung, but I shrugged them off. We were planning a wedding, after all. Stress does strange things to people. One night, I came home late from work and found her scrolling through social media, her face blank. When I asked if something was wrong, she said she felt like we were stuck. I reminded her that every couple she waited for me to respond, maybe to beg, maybe to fight for her. But all I could do was sit still, staring at the candle between us flickering like a dying heartbeat. The truth was brutal, but it was also freeing. Madison hadn't grown past me. She had grown out of gratitude. She wanted a version of love that sparkled more than it sustained. When the waiter came to clear the table, she thanked him with the same voice she had used to end us. And just like that, the woman who once promised me forever walked away before dessert got cold. ChatGPT it did. The air left the room, and for a moment, even the soft jazz stopped meaning anything. The waiter who had been walking toward our table froze mid-step, pretending not to hear what had just shattered my world. Madison looked calm, too calm, like she had been preparing for this performance for weeks. I stared at her, my chest heavy, trying to process the words that had just rewritten the last 3 years of my life. I asked her if she meant she did not understand me or if she did not want any more. Her eyes flickered, then fell to the dessert plate between us. She did not answer. She did not need to. I saw it in her face, in the way she avoided my eyes like they were mirrors showing her everything she no longer wanted to see. She had been gone for a while. Tonight was only her way of saying it out loud. I took a breath, pushed my chair back, and stood. The sound of the legs scraping the floor made her flinch. I placed my card on the table, told her to figure out who she was without me, and walked away before she could turn my dignity into another speech. The night air outside felt colder than it should have. I stood by my car for a minute, staring at the city skyline, and realized that no amount of love could fix someone who had already decided they had outgrown you. Her friends called me dramatic the next day. They said she was under pressure, that she needed time. Her mother sent me a long text filled with excuses, saying Madison was just confused. I deleted it. Love shouldn't have to be decoded like a riddle. That night, I packed a duffel bag with clothes, a few tools from the garage, and drove to my buddy Ryan's apartment on the east side of town. He didn't ask many questions. He just handed me a beer, turned on a basketball game, and said he had a spare couch. It was the quiet kind of comfort that words can't give. Before leaving, I had placed the engagement ring on the kitchen counter beside her planner. It felt symbolic, the two things she had once cared most about, planning and promises, now side by side, both useless. The apartment looked smaller without her energy in it, but also felt strangely honest. No pretense, no performance, just walls and silence. The next morning, my phone buzzed. A long message appeared, paragraphs of careful phrasing and emotional logic. She wrote that she needed space to grow, that love should feel inspiring, not routine, that she was scared of settling into something that didn't challenge her. I read it twice and realized every sentence was about her. There was no mention of us, no remorse, no recognition of what she had done. I typed a single reply and sent it without hesitation. Growth doesn't require betrayal, just honesty. She never responded. That silence said more than words ever could. That weekend, she came by to move her things out. I wasn't there. Ryan had convinced me to spend the day with him at a car show in Columbus. When I returned that evening, the apartment smelled like lavender candles and fresh emptiness. The walls looked cleaner, as if she had erased herself completely. Her side of the closet was bare, her makeup gone from the sink, her plants missing from the windowsill. The only thing she had left behind was a single framed photo of us at the lake where we met. I picked it up, stared at it for a moment, and then set it face down on the counter. That night, I sat on the floor surrounded by boxes of what used to be a shared life. I ordered takeout, ate straight from the container, and let the quiet sink in. It wasn't anger I felt, it was clarity. For months, I had been holding together something that was already collapsing. She had stopped seeing me long before she left. I looked around that empty space and realized the silence didn't scare me anymore. It almost felt like peace. I could finally hear myself think without her constant comparisons echoing in the background. I stayed there for hours, staring at the ceiling, wondering how love could shift from building a life together to walking away without looking back. Outside, the city hummed with noise and lights, unaware that my world had just fallen apart. But deep down, something small and solid began to grow, a quiet certainty that losing her wasn't the end. It was the beginning of remembering who I was before someone made me feel like I wasn't enough. The first few weeks after Madison left felt like walking through smoke. Every room, every memory, every sound carried her name. Friends I thought were mine started fading into silence, afraid to pick a side. Some told me I had held her back, that maybe she needed someone more ambitious. Others avoided me entirely, as if heartbreak were contagious. I scrolled through social media one night and saw her face smiling beside new people, champagne glasses raised, captions about new beginnings and self-healing. She looked lighter. I looked tired. That was the difference between the one who leaves and the one who stays behind to clean the ashes. I threw myself into work. My hand became my therapy. The hum of engines, the smell of oil, the sound of a wrench clicking into place. Those things reminded me that I could still fix something, even if it wasn't my relationship. I started picking up double shifts, taking every side job I could. My boss noticed and asked if I was chasing overtime. I told him I was chasing purpose. Nights were long, mornings shorter, but I preferred exhaustion to the quiet that waited at home. One Saturday, while sorting through bills, I noticed the thick folder labeled wedding expenses. For a minute, I thought about throwing it away. Then I opened it and started calling every vendor listed inside. Most deposits were refundable if canceled early enough. I stayed polite on every call, explaining that plans had changed. When the last one confirmed a refund, I transferred every cent into a new savings account under my name and labeled it Future Garage. It felt like the first real decision I'd made for myself in months. A month later, I signed a lease on a small space downtown, a former storage unit with peeling paint and a cracked floor. To anyone else, it looked hopeless. To me, it looked like freedom. I spent 2 weeks cleaning, repainting, and setting up equipment with Ryan's help. When I finally opened the doors, I expected a trickle of customers. Instead, 3 cars rolled in the first week. By the 4th, word had spread around town that a new mechanic was taking work seriously, no gimmicks, no overcharging. Honest work turned out to be better marketing than any ad could buy. Every day felt like progress. I started sleeping again, eating properly, talking to people without feeling the sting of pity in their eyes. Madison's name came up less and less. But then, one afternoon, I got a call from the catering company we had booked for the wedding. The woman asked if I wanted to transfer the deposit to another event before it expired. I almost said no. Then something inside me shifted. I told her yes, and within a week, I organized a barbecue behind my new shop, a thank you to everyone who had stood by me when everything fell apart. My mom helped with the food, Ryan handled the grill, and half the neighborhood showed up. It wasn't grand, but it was real. Laughter filled the air, country music played softly from a speaker, and for the first time in months, I felt surrounded by people who actually cared. Halfway through the evening, I posted a picture of the gathering, me, my mom, a few friends, all smiling in front of my new garage sign. No captions about healing or rebirth, just a picture of life moving forward. The next day, Madison found out. A mutual friend texted saying she had seen the photo and called it petty. That evening, I received a message from her that said, "You're celebrating already." I stared at it for a while before replying. "No, I'm just finally done mourning." That was the last message we ever exchanged. A week later, her online glow started to dim. Her posts slowed down, the smiles in her pictures looked thinner. Rumors spread that the new guy she had been seeing had disappeared after finding old messages she never deleted. Some of the same friends who once defended her began quietly drifting back into my life, suddenly realizing the truth behind her curated version of events. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt distant, like I had already outgrown the need for their approval. My business kept growing. I hired one part-time helper, then another. The garage became more than work. It was proof that broken things could still create something better when rebuilt with patience. I stopped thinking of what I lost and started noticing what I gained. Peace, independence, respect. By the end of that third month, I realized that revenge doesn't always need anger. Sometimes it looks like progress. Sometimes it looks like a man quietly rebuilding his world, while the person who walked away finally realizes what they destroyed. 6 months later, my life barely resembled what it used to be. The garage had grown faster than I imagined, busy from morning until dusk. I had hired 2 full-time employees, both younger guys eager to learn, and every time I watched them work, I felt proud. The smell of oil and steel had become the scent of peace, not survival. I had bought a modest house near the lake, a quiet place where the wind carried nothing but calm. On weekends, I went fishing with my dad, the kind of slow, wordless mornings that heal things time alone cannot. Somewhere in between, I adopted a rescue dog named Finn, a black lab with mismatched eyes and more patience than most people I knew. Each day felt more like a beginning than an ending. I woke early, brewed coffee, and drove to the garage with music playing low in the background. Customers came not just for service, but for conversation. They liked that I remembered names, details, stories. Some even brought their families to meet the guy who turned heartbreak into horsepower. One Saturday morning, I stopped by a coffee shop downtown before heading to the lake. The place smelled like roasted beans and cinnamon, full of soft chatter and people scrolling through their phones. As I stood in line, someone called my name. When I turned, it took me a second to recognize her. Madison. She looked different, thinner, her hair shorter, her smile hesitant, her voice smaller than I remembered. There was a kind of tiredness in her eyes that no amount of self-care advice could hide. She gave a small smile and said that I looked happy. I nodded and said I was. It was the truth. For a moment, neither of us spoke. She glanced down at her cup, tracing the lid with her finger, and said softly that she thought freedom would feel like peace. Then she looked up and said it had only become noise, empty noise with no one to share it with. I saw a flicker of sadness in her face, not regret exactly, but the quiet realization of consequences. I didn't gloat. I didn't remind her of what she threw away. The version of me she left no longer existed. The man standing in front of her had outgrown the need for validation. I wished her well, genuinely. I told her I hoped she found the peace she was still searching for. Then I walked out into the sunlight. Outside, the world looked clear and simple.